Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Learn to Sew with Nani. Guys, in today's tutorial we're going to learn how to make a 6 pieces or a 6 panel blouse. So I'm going to start with marking out my vertical point. So you will need your chest line, your bust point, your underbust, your half length, and the length of your blouse. So you just go ahead and mark those lines one after the other. Just make a mark at those points, then you go ahead and rule them all into a straight line. So after that, you want to start drafting your basic bodice pattern. Guys, I have a detailed tutorial on my channel on how to do that, but I'll just walk you through what I've done. I marked my shoulder line on the chest line, and I made it into a straight line. Then on the bust line on the chest line, I marked quarter of the bust, on the waist quarter of the waist, and on the hip quarter of the hip. I'm doing my shoulder slope of 1 inch. Then I'm going to measure what I have left on my armhole, mark it and go in by ½ inch, then draft my armhole. So now we have a basic body. So this is the chest line, bust point, under bust, and half length. We haven't added any allowance to this, so we now want to transform this into a princess Dart Bustier. So we need our bust pan, which is a nipple to nipple measurement. So whatever I have as a nipple to nipple measurement, divide that by 2 and add ½ inch same allowance. So go ahead and mark that on the bust point, under bust, half length, and blouse length, and extend into a straight line, just as you see me do. So this line you are seeing is my bust pan line, or my nipple to nipple line. So to create my princess Dart Bustier, I'm going to connect the bust point to half of my armhole measurement, like so. Okay, so we're creating the style line for princess Dart Bustier. So from that bust point, I'm going to go up by 1 inch, also come downwards by 1 inch, because we don't want to have tightness and puffiness around the bust point, so that we'll have a very smooth princess Dart Bustier curve. Now I'm going to measure the distance from my bust point to under bust. What I have there is 4 inches. I'll divide that by 2, which is 2 inches. So I'm going to place that as my dart. So I'm marking 2 inches on the under bust, half length, and blouse length. So this is how you determine the dart you take for your bustier. There are so many other methods which I have also shared in my tutorials before now. So this other method as well gives you your dart. So from the under bust, you're going to connect using the curvy part of your ruler to the 1 inch we came down below the bust point. So you can get a very curvy ruler to define the curve, because that's the area around the bust. So you want to give it a very sweet and smooth curve. Now remember, we took a dart of 2 inches. That's the dart we're going to be working with now. So because the dart here at the under bust downward is 2 inches, we're going to come down by 2 inches from the midpoint of the armhole, and we're going to connect it to 1 inch before the bust point. Okay, that 1 inch we made before the bust point, we're going to just connect it like so. Now remember, you've taken a dart of 2 inches, so you need to replace that dart. Before you do that, just go ahead and blend your curve. Make sure that everything is so nice and smooth, and make sure everything looks really nice. You don't want to have any puffiness and pointiness at that point. So the dart you took here is 2 inches. We're going to extend this line by 2 inches, just so that we don't have a shortage by the time we're done cutting this. Okay, so that when you're joining, you will not have issues. So we extend it by 2 inches like so. Then we'll redraft our armhole, but I'll do that when I'm done taking in the measurements. You can as well do this now, but when I'm done taking in my measurements, I'll redraft my armhole. Now for the dart on the center front, we're going to take a dart of ½ inch on the under bust, half length, and blouse length. What we have taken previously was the side dart. So for the center front dart, we're taking ½ inch dart. I'm going to connect this point into a straight line from under bust to the blouse length. Okay, then I'm going to connect to 1 inch below the bust point, like so. Right, so I know I have so many other tutorials on my channel on how to make a princess Dart Bustier, but I like to use this method when I'm making a full length blouse, and the other method when I'm making a half scale blouse, right? So this is what we have. This is a princess Dart Bustier. So you can now start taking in your measurements and replacing all the that you have taken out. So I took a dart of 2.5 inches, 2 inches on the side front and ½ inch on the center front. So I'm going to replace that dart of 2.5 inches across the points that I took the dart. Then at the chest line, the dart there is around ½ inch. You can see I'm measuring it is around ½ inch. So just go ahead and replace that dart. So whatever that you've taken out, just go and make sure you measure it and replace it, so you don't have a shortage when you join or couple your fabric together. So I'll just connect the points and it's going to look sloppy and somehow, but by the time you take in, well, by the time you cut out the darts to start your fabric, everything's just going to look nice again. So I'm going to add my seam allowances now. So I'll do a seam allowance of 2.5 or 3 inches depending on what you're comfortable with working with. So let's stick to 3 inches. Okay, 2 inches normal seam allowance and 1 inch to couple the darts, because by the time you cut out your princess dart bustier, you're going to need allowance to couple the darts together. So 1 inch, because you have to attach from the center front to the side front using half inch seam allowance. So half inch on the both sides make some to 1 inch. So that's why I'm doing 3 inches. 2 inches normal seam allowance plus 1 inch, which is your dart sewing allowance or your dart seam allowance. Okay, so I hope you get that. So now you can now redraft your armhole. At this point, you can go ahead and redraft your armhole to anyhow you want it to be. Okay, so just go and give it a smooth curve, and that is your armhole. The next thing you can do would be to determine the type of neckline you want. Okay, so I want a boat neckline, so I'm just going to come inwards from my shoulder area. I'll come inwards by 3 inches, like so. So that's how wide I want the neckline to be, 3 inches. Okay, so I also gotta make sure I define my shoulder slope properly. You can see, so for the depth, I want the depth to be 4 inches. So 3 inches from my shoulder and 4 inches depth, that is what I'm doing. Please, your own neckline might differ according to your preference. So just do whatever you're comfortable with and whatever you like to do. Okay, fashion is about your style, whatever you like, how you like to appear. Okay, so I have drafted my neckline and make sure I adjusted my shoulder slope. So what I'll do is just to cut this out. Right, so I hope you get everything I've just done here, and if you don't, if you have any confusion, I'm here in the comment section to answer to all the questions you may have concerning this particular tutorial we're making now. So let's try to stick to the topic we are discussing. Okay, for each video, for each tutorial, let's try to stick to the topic when we're asking our questions, so that it helps me to coordinate properly. Okay, so you cut like so. So remember, this is your dart allowance. I just want to identify this line so you don't get confused. So this is your dart replacement. Okay, that replacement allowance. Okay, and this is your normal seam allowance plus that allowance. Remember, I've already explained that, so just so that you don't get confused as to how many lines that we have. Okay, so if you have any confusions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or rewind the video to understand it better. So I'll cut through my neckline and shoulder slope. Right, so then I'll start cut. Please watch to be sure of how I am cutting this. Okay, you can see, so just take it step by step gradually. Now when I'm making patterns, or even when I'm cutting directly on my fabric, I like to cut the dart on the side front first, because that part has what is unfold, so that it doesn't pieces when you're done cutting, and it just gives you some false readings and wrong measurements. So try to cut the dart on the side front first before you now cut that of the center front. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm cutting the dart of the side front first. This is it. Okay, so you also want to make sure that you get the round defined shape of the bust, so that when you wear this, it's going to look so nice and beautiful. I hope you see how beautiful our princess dart bustier turned out to be. So you're going to start cutting the dart on the center front, and when you get to this point, you just want to make sure that you follow exactly the marks you have made, okay, or the draftings you have done. So this is the second part, that's the center front, and this here is the side front. So I'm just going to go and identify these lines as well: chest line, bust point, under bust, half length, and blouse length, because we're going to be transferring this pattern to the fabric, and you want to make sure that you have all the lines properly identified so you don't make a mistake or have an error. So because it's a paneled blouse, you need to label your lines, because you're going to be adding some allowances to the fabric to flare it out as a paneled blouse. Right, so this is my center front, and I've folded my fabric into two. I've placed my fabric on fold. Then I'm placing the center front on the same fabric, making sure that the sides align. Okay, the center front aligns with the fold of my fabric, and I'm leaving some allowances after the pattern. This is the 6 pieces blouse, so you need to fly it out with whatever you're comfortable with. So between 3 inches to 3.5 or 4 inches, but please do not go above 4 inches. Just want it to be so much flare and it wouldn't look really nice. So I work between 3 inches to 3.5. I've really not done 4 inches. So at the shoulder area, you make sure you add your shoulder seam allowance. You did not add that when we are drafting the pattern. So you add half inch to the upper part as your shoulder seam allowance. And I'm going to trace the pattern up until the half length. Okay, because you need to start flying it out from the half length. But because I have a big tummy, and if you have a big tummy, you don't want to start flying from the half length, so I'll show you what to do when you get to that point. Now I've marked 3.5 inches away from my pattern. Now, like I said about having big tummy, you want to go up by 1 inch or 1.5 inches above your half length, so that the flare will just start from somewhere underneath your under bust, and it wouldn't show so much of your tummy if you have a big tummy. So that's why we do that. Then you're going to add 2 inches at the lower part of your pattern for your hemming allowance, right? So that's what I've just done. Remember, you're going to bring your center front down, then you add 3.5 inches for flaying it out. Okay, so from 1 inch or 1.5 inches underneath your underbust, you're going to flare it out to the 3.5 inches. Okay, so this is what it looks like. This is the center front, and that's the paneled blouse. So you can now go ahead and cut it out. Remember that this just mark from your underbust to your half. But if your tummy is flat, you don't need to go up by 1 inch or 1.5 inches from your half length. You can start flaying it directly from your half length. You can flay it out directly from your half length. But if you have a bit of tummy like I do, and you want to actually conceal that a little bit, you have to take the flare a little bit upper, so that it's going to help to cover your uh, tummy area. So 1 inch before the half length, or 1.5 inches above the half length, is fine, so that it can conceal your tummy a little bit. So remember, you add half-inch allowance to the upper area as your shoulder seam allowance. Then you're going to go ahead and trim off your neckline. So this is how you add your flare to your panel blouse, and this procedure, this method helps us to save fabric. If I draft my 6 pieces blouse directly on my fabric, I'm going to waste and use up a lot of fabric. But using drafting directly on my pattern helps me to manage my fabric, and by the time I'm done, I think I used about 2 yards to 2.5 yards to make this, and it came out really nice. Okay, so we're going to start adding the flare for the center, for the side front. So as well, place the pattern on your fabric, fold into two, because you need 2 pieces for the side front. So you're going to place it in the way that you have 3.5 inches on both sides of the pattern, okay, so that you can flare it out. So from the center, from the sides, you're going to have 3.5 inches on all sides. Now remember, I said you should add your 2 inches hemming allowance to the center front. Also do the same thing to the side front. Add your 2 inches hemming allowance. Okay, we do not add that to the pattern. Right, so remember, go up by 1 inch from your half length if you have a bit of tummy and you want to conceal that. Okay, so also bring down your where your pattern ended. Just mark that on the fabric, so it can help you to add the right amount of seam allowance. I'm adding 3.5 inches for my flare, and from 1 inch above my half length, I'm just going to flare it out. And on the other side, I also go up by 1 inch above the half length. So that's why I said you should mark out these points, identify them, label them, so that you won't get confused as to which point is which when you're flaring out. So remember, 1 inch above the half length and 3.5 inches flaring out. I'm just going to go ahead and connect from the 1 inch above my half length to where I have the hemline. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this out. Right, so you make sure you get exactly what you have around the curve of the princess Dart Bustier. So you have a very smooth princess Dart Bustier that accommodates your bust really well, sits really beautiful on your bust, and you don't have puffiness and pointiness around your bust. point. Okay, so this is how you make your paneled blouses. You can have a 6 pieces, a 12 pieces, and 8 pieces blouse. I'm going to do a blouse series, okay, pieces blouse series. So after having this 6 pieces blouse, we're going to do 8 pieces and 12 pieces. All right, so you can have as much pieces as you want. So after this 6 pieces tutorial, please make sure you please try to expect another tutorial on how to make an 8 pieces and also a 12 pieces blouse. So this is what it looks like. We're going to go over to the back and also show you how to draft the back using the same pattern. Okay, you have to start economizing, so things are pretty expensive in the market, especially tailoring materials. So I'm going to use one pattern to cut both the front and the back, and I'm going to show you how I did that. Now for me to draft my back pattern, this is the center back now. So I've placed the center front on it, and I'm adding my 2 inches hemming allowance, and also before the center front I've added my 1.5 inches zip allowance. As you can see, I have some allowances before the pattern. Okay, so that allowance 1.5 is my zip allowance for the back. You can see that. So that's my zip allowance at the back. Right, so I've also noted where the pattern ended, and I've added my 2 inches hemming allowance. So you're going to go up by 1 inch from your half length. Remember, that's what we did for the front, so we repeat the same procedure at the back. Then I'm going to flare it to 3.5 inches. Then I'll maintain what I have on the other part of the fabric or the pattern. Remember to add your half-inch shoulder seam allowance, very, very important. Then you can decide to maintain the neckline you have in front, or also do whatever type of neckline you want at the back. So for now, I'm just going to maintain the neckline I have in front so that I can draft it out on the fabric. Then when I take out the pattern paper, I can now do the type of neckline I want. Now for my neckline depth, I want the neckline depth to be at least 2 inches above the chest lines. I'm just going to mark that out before I take out my pattern. 2 inches above my chest line. That's how deep I want my neckline to be for the back. So I'm just going to cut out like so, and I hope you understand what I've just done. Please remember, I'm here in the comment section to answer to all of your questions concerning this particular tutorial. Okay, so if you have other questions on other tutorials we have done, just go to that particular tutorial and drop your question so that it doesn't confuse me. If you have any question outside the tutorial we're doing, I'll drop my WhatsApp line in the description box so that you can chat me up on WhatsApp, and I'll identify or clear it up for you. Okay, so that's what I've just done. Add your shoulder seam allowance and just cut like so I can take out my pattern now. So the next thing I'll do would be to redraft my neckline. I want the neckline to be 2 inches above my chest line. Okay, so I can now redraft my neckline. Right, so this is how the center back would look like. Also go ahead and notch your zipper allowance, okay, so that when you're transferring or when you're sewing, it's easy to identify where your zipper allowance starts from. Also try to slash it open because we need to fix the zipper in between, so it has to be slashed open. Right, so after that we're going to move to the center back. Right, so for the center back, you're also going to fold your fabric into 2 because you need 2 pieces for the center back. All right, and you're also going to get your side front. Remember I said we're going to use one pattern to cut this blouse. So remember there's no bustier at the back, so we're going to eliminate the bustier. Okay, so like so from the under bust to where I have my princess bustier curve, I'm going to eliminate the bustier. Okay, so you can either cut it out or fold it in. I like to fold it in because I can still use this pattern to make another blouse or dress or whatever comes into my mind. So no wastage here, guys. So you can cut it out, your option, but I like to fold it in or even pin it down so that it lays. But it's paper. If you fold it, it will just lay really flat. So this becomes the side back. Okay, now remember that when you folded it in, you've removed some allowances from the fabric. Remember the dart we took there is 2 inches, so you have lost 2 inches from your pattern. So when you're marking on your fabric, you're going to add 2 inches to the chest line. I'm going to place this together so I can explain what I mean. We have folded in 2 inches for your dart. Remember, we have a dart that formed the bustier. So taking that out has made your your pattern or your fabric short of 2 inches, because that's 2 inches is what you use for your dart. So make sure you add it back. Now another thing you can do to be sure of what I'm doing, you can see at this upper part, at this armhole area, I have a shortage. So when I'm transferring to my fabric, I have a shortage of around 1 inch. Okay, so when I'm transferring to my fabric, I'm going to add that back. Now for your bust measurement, I'm going to measure. You see I have 12 inches. Meanwhile, I'm supposed to have 14 inches. Remember, my bust is 44 divided by 4, that's 11. Then I'll need 3 inches allowance, 2 inches normal seam allowance, and 1 inch to couple the darts together. So you can see that I'm short of 2 inches. That's that 2 inches that we folded in. So when you are transferring to your fabric, okay, you're going to add 2 inches to the chest line. So afterwards, you can go ahead to measure the waist and the hip to ensure that you have your accurate measurements. But that wouldn't be a problem because everything would match at this point. But I just think you should still go ahead and measure the waist and the hip to be sure everything is in order, and you can always add the seam allowances if you have a shortage. Right, so you're going to fold your fabric into two, then place the side front on it, which you turn to your side back pattern. So this normal procedure that we did before, you're going to make sure that you have 3.5 inches on both sides of the pattern, and you're going to add 2 inches at the lower part for your hemming allowance. So that's what I'm doing. I've added my 2 inches for hemming allowance. Then I'll bring down the sides of my pattern, okay, mark it on my fabric, and add 3.5 inches on both sides to flare it out. Okay, so that's it. Then also 1 inch above my half length, like I've said, that should just make sure that you conceal your tummy as much as you can. Okay, so just come down by 1.5 or 2 inches from your underbust. You can as well go up from your half length by 1 inch or 1.5. So it totally depends on how much you want to conceal. But if you have a flat tummy, you can just start flaring out from your half length. It wouldn't make any difference. Okay, so I'm just going to flare it out from 1 inch above the half length to the 3.5 inches that are flared out. Now at the chest line, I'm adding 2 inches. Remember, I'm short of 2 inches allowance, so I've added it like back. Then at the armhole, I have around 1 inch shortage. I'm going to make it 2 inches or 1.5 just to be on the safe side. If I have an excess, I can always trim it off when I'm done. So I'm just going to redraft my armhole like so. Okay, then also blend the side. Okay, just make sure that I have exactly what I have on the pattern. So I'm just going to connect it to 1 inch before my half length. So you can now go ahead and cut. Make sure you cut exactly what you have by the side like so. Okay, just cut exactly till you get to that 1 inch before your half length. Then you can flare it out. That's right. Then you also go ahead and cut to the other side. So this is how you have or get your side back without having to redraw or redraft or even draft new patterns. So this particular tutorial or this particular method helps you to save your pattern, save time, and be more efficient. Gone are the days when you spend a whole day cutting a pieces blouse or just one blouse. So making a pattern can help you make your life and your work very easy and faster. So right here I have the side back for my project, you can see, and as well as a side front. So using the pattern to place it side by side, just as if I want to couple it together. Okay, this is the side back, this is one piece of the center back. Okay, so I'm just going to pretend, or like I want to couple it together, just so that we see that everything I have done here is going to match up by the time you also do yours. Okay, so you can just go ahead and place it together to see that you have everything in place. You can see, so when I'm done joining, if I have an excess at the armhole, I can always go and retrace or redraft my armhole. Also make sure that you cross check your shoulder measurement also on your pattern. Okay, so this is it. I have successfully cut out my center front, my side front, my center back, and my side back. So I'm going to go ahead and put fusible interfacing on all my patterns. Okay, whenever you're making a pieces blouse, you have to make sure that you interface it for stability. That's what's going to help it stand and flare out, okay, because it's a pieces blouse. So you can see on my fabric the ash colored material you're seeing on my fabric is my interfacing. Okay, so I've used, you can use hair stay, gum stay, whatever one you can afford. Also make sure you pad. I have a tutorial on how to pad your Princess Dart Bustier, so I used a light padding to pad. So I'm going to bring you a tutorial on how you can couple these 6 pieces blouse together. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed making this tutorial. Okay, I hope you enjoyed watching the tutorial as much as I enjoyed making it. So make sure you practice. I'll see you in the next tutorial, which would be the sewing tutorial. I love you. Bye. Stay safe.